Build 42 has been around for just short of a month now, and a whole bunch of new and existing players are returning to the game to try this major update. With all the new features, however, comes a lot of things you may not be familiar with, even if you've spent hundreds of hours with the game itself. Over the last few weeks, I've been putting together as many tips and tricks as I could possibly gather that are entirely new for this update, with over 50 of them in this video. None of this has been covered in my previous guides or tips videos, so even if you've watched all of my content before, this will bring you something different, and hopefully both veterans of the game and novices that are just taking their first steps can walk away from this video having learned something. This is my longest non-gameplay video to date, and a whole lot of work has gone into it, so hopefully you like it, and without further ado, let's get into tip number 1. Previously, one of the major items you'd always be on the lookout for in Project Zomboid was a backpack, giving you vastly improved storage capabilities. Until then, you need to carry things in your direct inventory, which really didn't give you much room to breathe. Now, however, sheets can be turned into a great early game backpack with no other requirements. All you'll need to do is take down some curtains from the first window you come across, and you'll have some extra space while you search for an upgraded backpack. Keys found on zombies now work differently. They aren't just for the building you're in, they could be for any building or vehicle nearby. In fact, I found a key on a zombie since the new update, and it opened a car that was a couple of streets over. I'm not 100% on how this works now, but I'd take an educated guess that these are generated when the zombie spawns, meaning they could have wandered around a bit before you found them, and now be quite far from their original spawn location when dropping the key. Keys now have actual weight, meaning that you won't be able to carry as many as you want anymore. While I'm not a huge fan of this feature and think that realism is definitely interrupting enjoyment here, it is important to know about. You may not want to pick up every key you come across now, but if you decide that you'd still like to, there is a method I've been using to organize them. Right-click the key and rename it based on where it was found, and then mark that location on your map. For example, I could name any keys found in Rosewood as R1, R2, R3, and so on. I then mark R1, R2, and R3 over the buildings they are used to unlock. It's also worth noting that hovering over a key in your inventory while standing next to the door it unlocks will highlight the door, allowing you to identify which key is used for which building. Keep an eye out for readable literature items often found in mailboxes, glove boxes, or on zombie bodies. These are brand new items in Build 42, and they aren't just for show either. You can click the small map icon in the bottom right corner of the tab to view where these locations are on the wider map and discover them permanently. These literature items could be highlighting a good potential safe house location, a general point of interest, or somewhere that's worth looting. Either way, it makes sense to pick them up and discover these locations using the brochures when you find them. Wearing certain clothing items can now make you uncomfortable. Generally speaking, you'll want to try not to wear anything that isn't considered day-to-day clothing for an extended period. For example, wearing a respirator half mask for too long will make you uncomfortable the longer you wear it. You can get away with wearing certain items like knee or elbow pads for much longer, but combining them with other items like, say, a police stab vest might be too much. Think about which areas you'll struggle to cover with standard clothing or tailoring improvements and focus on those wherever possible. Most protective gear will slow down either your movement speed or your combat speed. The only reason I mention this is that the display for this when inspecting your gear is incredibly misleading. You would think that the more green bar that's visible, the better the item would be, but unfortunately, it's the opposite of that. The larger the size of the green bar, the slower it will make your attacks or your movements. Most items that would apply to the character's upper body will affect combat speed, whereas those applied to the lower body will instead affect movement speed. For example, elbow pads reduce your attack speed, whereas knee pads reduce your move speed. On a similar note to the last tip in this video, it's worth mentioning that not all protective gear of the same type is built equal. For example, knee pads and elbow pads that you'll find when looting residential houses are great, but if you find a military set, they will have less effect on your movement and combat speed, making them even better than their standardized counterparts. Darkness is now a massive hindrance and a very real danger in Build 42. If you're fumbling around inside a building in the dark, look for the small orange glow emitted by light switches to help you find your way to a light source. You'll only be able to see them on walls where the camera angle allows for this, but it could save you in a tough situation. It's more important than ever to try and locate a flashlight as quickly as possible, Also, if you find one, keep it on your character, because even though it might be daytime outside, natural light may not stretch to cover the entire interior of the building, and in such situations, a flashlight will be a necessity, especially after the power grid fails. Muscle strain has been added to the game, and this has already proven to be a controversial addition that some don't enjoy and others do. The more physical activity you conduct, including fighting zombies, the more strain is built, and you'll find that your character starts to feel pain if you continue to push them further. This will slow their attacks and put them at great risk of being overwhelmed. Now, muscle strain doesn't last for very long, but it's essentially to stop you from going and cutting down massive hordes when you're a brand new character. If you see it start to kick in, just take a quick breather before you go on. If you prefer not to play with this feature entirely, it can be turned off in the sandbox settings. The building of muscle strain while attacking is mainly related to three things: your character's strength skill, their skill level with the category of weapon you're using, and lastly, the weight of the weapon itself. A higher weight weapon you are level 1 skill with will have a higher effect on muscle strain than a lighter weapon you are level 3 skill with. Strength level 5 characters will see increased muscle strain build than those with strength level 7. Now, there are a couple of additional layers to muscle strain that can be a huge help to know in advance. Firstly, assuming a one-handed weapon and a two-handed weapon have the same weight, the two-handed weapon will cause less muscle strain overall for every attack. If for some reason you decide to use a two-handed weapon in one hand, you will build muscle strain much quicker. There's no real reason to do this, so just stick to using two hands for any weapon intended to be used that way. Lastly, carrying too much will also cause muscle strain in your character's upper and lower torso. Try to minimize this wherever possible. As a handy little trick, if you're completing timed actions that can be done while standing still, like sawing logs for example, sit down on the ground before you start the process, and even if you're over encumbered, you'll ensure your character doesn't build muscle strain or take damage from carrying too much weight. To combat the build of muscle strain, there are a few things you can do to reduce its impact and make combat significantly easier for you. First and foremost, it's a good idea to pick a category of weapon early on that you'd like to focus on and train. Weapon skill has a massive effect on muscle strain, so if you stick to short blunt weapons early on, you'll soon find that you can fight much longer when using this type of weaponry. It's also more important than ever to use windows or fences to your advantage in combat, allowing you to take less swings, thus building less muscle strain and scoring an instant kill while the zombie is on the ground. On that same token, mixing in stomps when a zombie is grounded instead of using your weapon will distribute muscle strain to different parts of the body and ensure you aren't building it all in your arms and making your attacks slower for your character. In order to siphon gas from vehicles, you will now not only need a gas can but a rubber hose as well. Make sure you grab one if you spot them when looting, you will be thankful for it later. Lots of new map areas have been added to the game in Build 42, but just as a heads up, if you decide to take on the Echo Creek spawn location, expect this area to be quite rural. It makes a good location for new players because things are quite relaxed with the new zombie distribution mechanics, but as a trade-off, you'll likely not see as much loot and will need to consider driving long distances for some of the essential items, or just uprooting and moving to a new area of the map entirely. Just something to keep in mind if you decide to spawn here. Speaking of which, when choosing your spawn area, there's a new on-screen map that will show you where these spawn locations are. You can actually use this map to identify some of the new areas you want to mark up for future use, such as Irvington or Brandenburg. For new players especially, this can be a very handy tool to help you get familiar with the wider area of Knox Country. Certain points of interest that you might want to go on a loot run for, such as gas stations, are even marked on this map as well. When getting ready to turn in for the night and give your character some much deserved rest, keep in mind that pillows now serve a functional purpose. They can be used to boost the quality of your sleep and should be placed on the bed or held in your direct inventory to ensure you get the benefit from them. Having them in your backpack will not work, so keep that in mind. I've started throwing one in my vehicle when taking long excursions to do some looting, because in the worst case situation where I have to sleep away from my safe house, I'll still have that extra bonus. When you're using a pillow that's been placed, make sure to right click near it and ensure that the prompt includes with pillow. It's easy to click too far away and not gain any benefits at all if you aren't paying attention. Keep an eye out for these little visual effects forming on the surface of rivers, ponds, or lakes. This indicates the presence of fish in the the area, so you'll know exactly where to cast your line if you're trying to catch some food for your evening meal. The act of fishing itself now comes with a minigame and is no longer something you can just leave running passively. Right-click your fishing rod to add a bait of your choice to your hook. From there, simply right-click to aim, move your cursor over where you want to fish, and left-click to cast your line. Once you have a bite, hold left-click to reel in your catch, and right-click to reduce line tension. Holding left-click will build line tension and risks the fish getting away if you let it enter the areas on the right side of the bar. Take it slow, give the fish some slack when they fight back, and you should find the act of fishing relatively easy. To have the best possible results when fishing, try to cast your fishing bobber into areas of activity that are at least 7 tiles away from any land. This will make it more likely to catch medium or large size fish and reduce the chance to catch smaller fish. You will also halve the time it takes to get bites compared to if you fish close to the shoreline. For these reasons, building a dock to fish on or using one that's already placed can be incredibly useful. You should also ensure that you can cast at least 4 tiles from your character or you'll triple the time it takes to get a bite. Keep in mind that making any noise nearby to active fishing areas can scare away the fish. This includes things like gunshots or yelling. Stay quiet and those active fishing areas will be active for longer. Now, if you find that you're losing some food to the progression of time, don't just throw it away once it's rotten. You may already know that it can be used in a composter to create fertilizer for crops, but what you may not know is that rotten meat can now be used as bait for fishing in Build 42, and it tends to have some pretty good results as well. Livestock that you find in the world will have their own zone that they will automatically stay within. If you want to move an animal to a new safe house, you'll need to create a new zone for them using this menu on the left side of your screen. To transport animals over long distances to a new zone, you'll need a trailer like this one. You can load animals into these trailers for transport. Just make sure that you add some food to the feeding trough within the trailer for them to snack on during the journey. You'll also need a rope to lead large animals to and from the trailer, and with smaller animals like chickens or turkeys, you can simply pick them up and drop them into either the trailer or a new zone. If you're looking after some livestock at your safe house, don't worry about filling their drinking trough all the way, or you can even just leave some troughs empty within their zone. When it rains, they'll fill up very quickly, and you won't need to worry about topping up water manually from here, since they aren't going to drink a huge amount unless you have a whole lot of animals. Your animals will be stressed out by zombie presence, which encourages them to flee outside their zone and can result in escaped animals. This is why you'll need to build a fenced off area for them, which will prevent them from fleeing their zone if they get stressed. Be sure to kill any zombies that might disturb your animals in order to keep them calm. Certain animals, and namely the male ones, will attack you if stressed, so I'd advise keeping an eye on their temperament, especially in order to avoid wounds. Animals witnessing the slaughter of other animals nearby to them will also result in similar stress being built up. Keep an eye out when looting for some new magazines that will teach your character the growing seasons of various crops. They'll take much longer to reach their fully grown stage now in Build 42, and there will be certain months of the year that perform better than others for every single crop. You can also learn this information by reading seed packets before you open them. If you're not a fan of waiting this long for your crops to grow, you can change this setting in the sandbox options and go back to the classic Build 41 approach. There is a new item in Build 42 that you should always be on the lookout for. These handy knives are rare, but can serve a whole range of purposes and can vastly reduce the amount of items you need to carry around. They fulfill the role of knives, can openers, corkscrews, bottle openers, screwdrivers, and are even capable of butchering animals. I've only found one of these so far, so I'd say it's probably safe to assume that they are quite rare. You can now open cans with a blade or a sharp stone. However, there is a risk of injuring your character by opening something this way, and you will damage the blade that you use in doing so. Be especially careful when opening a can after you acquire a can opener, because if you're still carrying a blade of some kind, the two options appear right beside each other on the right click menu, and it can be easy to select the wrong option by mistake. Now, previously, if you wanted to find stones for crafting, you would need to forage for them. You may have noticed, however, that there are significantly more stones just laying around on the map, and they aren't just for decoration. If you right click on them, you'll be able to collect stones without using foraging. This can be handy if you're living out in the middle of nowhere and want to start crafting, or if you've had a really tough time finding weapons in the early game, because stones can actually be used as a short blunt weapon and are reasonably powerful too. Stealth is much more viable in Build 42 and can be very beneficial to you in built-up areas that are likely to hold a lot more zombies. This is especially important to know when you take into account the new muscle strain mechanics I mentioned earlier in the video. You don't have to take every single fight anymore. You can slip by groups of zombies much easier than you used to and get to the loot you need with less resistance. Darkness and fog now affect zombie vision as well. Either of these conditions will reduce the range of their vision and make it easier to slip by them unnoticed. Use this to your advantage when doing some late night loot runs or when it's foggy outside. Going out to busier areas at night is now a genuinely viable strategy if you want to draw less attention to yourself while doing so. All this said, keep in mind that if you do enter their visual range, the weather conditions will not reduce their chance of seeing you. It only affects their maximum range at present. There is now a handy indicator on the HUD when using your car for which side of the vehicle you can pump gas into. This used to be added by a mod, but this is now vanilla, meaning no additional mod is required and you can pull up your vehicle on the correct side first time, meaning you won't risk your life trying to turn the car around in order to fill it with gas. It is now possible to fill additional containers with fuel. You can now remove the bottles from water dispensers, and these will carry 15,000 milliliters, which is 5,000 more than a gas can. In a pinch, you can even use metal tins to carry 300 milliliters, but this won't get you very far at all. The largest I've seen so far is the use of a rain collector barrel that you can build via the carpentry building menu. When empty, these can be used to store fuel and will carry a whopping 600 liters or 600,000 milliliters of fuel. That's so much that you won't be able to stand there and fill it to maximum at the gas station itself, because it'll just be too much weight for your character to handle and will take several hours of in-game time to complete. Cleaning rags or bandages can no longer be done directly from a source of running water. You'll need to get yourself a receptacle to hold the water, like say a water bottle, to complete the action successfully. Now, this is a confirmed bug, so it should be fixed up later, but it's still good to know right now. You can of course still use disinfectant or some alcohol items to sterilize bandages as you would in Build 41. If you'd prefer to avoid this bug entirely, you can download a mod called Sink Cleaned Rags that is already available on the workshop and brings back this functionality. Dismantling items no longer grants experience points except for two skills, which are electrical and mechanics. This is crucial for veteran players that might be used to wandering around dismantling every piece of furniture in sight to level their carpentry or metalworking. While I was intending to make a full video about the best ways to level certain skills, I've decided against this for now, just because much of Build 42's new crafting system is simply incomplete, and there are a large amount of recipes that aren't available yet, which could be crucial for leveling these skills when added. Whilst we're touching on skills, it's worth noting that there are now some extra skill books that have been added to the game, and the biggest ones of those are the new aiming and reloading skill books. Previously, training to use firearms could be a real grind, but these books make it significantly easier to do so, especially with the new changes to the aiming system. While these books are definitely helpful, they are also quite rare, so keep your eyes peeled when looting military areas. The new aiming system brought to Build 42 can be tricky to master, and when you first try it out, you may even find that you don't like it initially. However, firearms can be incredibly powerful once you've got some skill levels in aiming, despite the early level in accuracy. There are also a couple of tricks to leveling quickly and having success with firearms at low levels. First and foremost, you should know that shotguns are still the easiest gun to use at low levels of aiming and will give you the most experience when used correctly. Project Zomboid YouTuber Retinaru did a fantastic video on this recently and found that the best way to level aiming was to engage zombies at point blank range with a shotgun. Up close and personal, the XP gains per shot seem to be between 2 and 6 experience points, but as you get further away, those hits are worth significantly less. In my own testing, I was able to reach 22.95 experience points just from 5 kills at close range. With every other weapon, Retinaru found that you would only gain 0.68 experience per hit. You really don't need many kills at all with the shotgun method to level up, less than 20 in fact, and that's without any XP boosts from books or occupations as well. When using firearms, consider that there are several things that will affect your aim. aim. This includes, but is not limited to, lighting, weather conditions, whether your character is moving or stationary, panic and other moodles, aiming skill level, weapon attachments like laser sights, and the intended range of the weapon in use. Before using firearms on larger groups, consider using beta blockers to help increase your chances of scoring hits. Panic is a huge factor when firing a weapon, and you won't hit much if your character's nerves are completely shot. Try to remember to stop for a moment and let your character's aim steady before pulling the trigger. If you're firing while moving, you're increasing the chances that each shot will miss the target. My final point for firearms here in this video is just to try and remember that while we do have a crosshair now, the direction your character is facing also plays a huge role. Make sure you are fully pointed at the target you intend to shoot. You'll also notice that you don't necessarily need to have the crosshair directly over the target as well for this reason, as long as they are in front of you and your gun is pointed directly at them. Now, there's a few bugs that at the time of me making this video, the developers are trying to work on with the firearms in Project Zomboid, so just be aware that anything covered here may be changed in the future. Generally speaking, in build 42, I found that after getting to level 5 aiming, firearms felt incredibly good to use, and before that point, it was very much like my character was still learning how to use them. Certain masks in Project Zomboid will now help protect against bad odors, which can be really useful for when you're clearing larger numbers of corpses around your safe house. Previously, in build 41, we would only know about the onset of corpse sickness when the Queasy Moodle appeared in the top right corner of our screen. Now, we're given a new Moodle aimed at showing when we're at risk of developing this sickness so that we can either equip necessary protective gear or leave the area before it gets too serious. Strangely, however, you're only at risk of corpse sickness when the bad odor reaches the highest level of this Moodle, which is one that's a deep red in color. Anything before that and you won't build corpse sickness and thus won't need a mask. Crates can now be picked up without risk of destroying them, making them a fantastic furniture item to grab early if you want to add storage to your safe house without the necessary knowledge to build your own. This applies to both wooden crates and larger capacity metal crates, so you'll have multiple options available to you here. Remember, they can also stack on top of one another for efficient storage in confined spaces. By default, you'll only be able to gain experience points from VHS tapes up to a maximum of skill level 3 in build 42. This also applies to the cooking, carpentry, and survival skill TV shows on the Life and Living channel that appear at 6 AM, 12 PM, and 6 PM respectively until the TV stations stop broadcasting. You can change this setting in the sandbox options if you wish to, but assuming you're playing on default settings, don't worry about waiting until you find beginner level skill books, because these TV shows can get you to level 3 without them, and they aren't going to be useful to you after that point anyway. There's an easy way to have your characters remember which books you already have back at your safe house too. Click on the book in the container at your base and expand the item's context menu. Do this for all of the books you currently have in storage. The next time you come across that same book, it will still be expanded, even in a different container. This way you'll know which ones to pick up and which ones you can leave behind. Of course, you can always go with the manual method of making a list of what books you have using a notepad or a sheet of paper as well. Many recipes are now tied to skill levels. For example, at level 3 electrical skill, you'll learn how to operate a generator without the need for the usual skill magazine. This particular item has become increasingly rare in build 42 thanks to changes to loot distribution and the addition of many more readable items diluting the loot spawns. It's a good idea to start stockpiling electrical items early so that you can dismantle them later once you've read the electrical skill books in order to gain the ability to operate a generator as quickly as possible. Speaking of generators, you may have already noticed that there are some new, different colored ones in the game. This isn't just for show, and some are definitely better than others. The standard red generator that you're used to from build 41 is now the middle of the range, with the yellow premium technologies generator being the best. This generator will have a lower chance to reduce condition with every tick, making it last longer before needing repairs. The old generator has a higher chance to reduce condition and is the loudest of all the generators, making it usable but certainly not advised if you have alternatives. Lastly, the value tech generator is louder than the standard generators but not quite as loud as the old generator. It has the shortest lifespan of all the generators available but is only 30 weight to carry, whereas the others have a weight of 40. In short, the red generator is okay, the yellow generator is the best, and the other two generators are the worst. You can now climb both up and down sheet ropes, which means you can double back if the ground isn't safe for landing. Just keep in mind that you can fall off sheet ropes now and potentially injure yourself, so they shouldn't be used as the default option for entering and exiting your safe house like they often were by many players in Build 41. By default, various zombie settings are now randomized on Apocalypse difficulty. This includes their speed and, more importantly, their hearing capabilities. This plays a big role when you're fighting zombies, as you may notice that others start to trickle in while you're in combat. That's basically because they can hear you laying into other zombies, and the more strikes you make, the more chance they have to narrow down your position. You may need to back up further than you're used to in order to avoid them hearing you when peeling away zombies from a group, and keep in mind every fight will likely include more Zeds than you first expect. The color of a car key often matches that of the vehicle they are used to operate, so if you find a random key and it's the color blue, the chances are it fits a blue car somewhere in the area, as demonstrated in this footage. Formerly, these water wells would give you clean, drinkable water in Build 41, and would make some locations an ideal safe house. In the new update, however, this is no longer the case. They are still useful for watering crops or hydrating your livestock, but make sure you don't go gathering water from them out of habit, expecting to be able to drink it. This water is now tainted and will kill your character if consumed. There are, however, some new freshwater pumps installed at various locations around Kentucky. These have probably been added to compensate for the previous water wells no longer having safe drinking water. These pumps are quite rare and only exist in a few locations. Coffee machines in Build 42 are now functional. You just need some water to fill them up and a bag of coffee beans. It'll consume the whole bag, which is hilarious to me because this coffee is about to leave you bouncing off the walls, but it's a good thing to know about all the same. Many food items in Build 42 have had their caloric values adjusted, which has resulted in it being significantly more difficult to keep your character weight within 75 and 85, which is the ideal range. The nutritionist trait is now more valuable than ever, at least in your first couple of runs, helping you to identify which items are going to be useful for putting on weight and which would be good if you're just looking to sate your character's hunger. As you'd probably expect from the information in my last tip in this video, the underweight trait, now renamed to high metabolism, is a really difficult one to work with in the new build. I'd advise against taking this one for now unless you're really looking for a challenge. Likewise, overweight has now been renamed to slow metabolism. With it being so incredibly easy to lose weight right now, especially in the early stages of your game before you can stock up on high calorie foods, this is actually much easier to deal with than it was in Build 41. One easy way to put on weight fast is to utilize either sheep or cows to produce milk. You'll need a bucket to collect milk from them, but once you have it, you can craft a butter churner with zero carpentry skill required and create large amounts of butter that will help you pile on the calories. Add this to dishes you cook, or even just eat it by the stick if that's your preference. I suspect this will be adjusted later because you can make some frankly insane amounts of butter right now with very little milk, but we'll see how that changes over time. Survivor houses are even more useful than they used to be in Build 41. You can identify these houses by the way they are already boarded up with wooden barricades, and if you find one, it's always worth trying to find a way inside, especially in the new update. These houses will now spawn magazines and schematics that will give you recipes for new parts of the crafting overhaul that you'd only really expect from the zombie apocalypse. For example, the crafting of weapons like swords. Melee weapons are now broken down into a couple of different components, which is important to know when your weapon breaks in combat. Just because your weapon breaks on you in a fight doesn't mean that the components can't be kept for later, repaired, and then put back into use. If an axe head or a blade is dulled, your weapon will do less damage, which means more attacks are needed, in turn making for higher muscle strain and more damage to the weapon itself. Sharpening the head or blade will mean that the weapon does more damage with less total swings required to kill, resulting in your weapon lasting much longer before it needs repairs again. Now in Build 41, the fabled sledgehammer was one of the most sought after items in the entire game, thanks to its ability to destroy walls. This would be especially useful when accessing gun stores like the one in West Point that have metal security shutters between you and the goods. mods. Now in build 42, this isn't your only option when it comes to breaking through these barriers. You can actually use a standard propane torch to break through them now, which I'm sure is great news for many survivors since the sledgehammers are so difficult to find. In build 42, you can actually clean floors or walls to remove a grimy, dirty looking texture and replace it with a clean one. You'll need appropriate tools like a mop, broom, or dish towel for this, and something to act as a cleaning agent. Interestingly, thanks to the new liquid system, you can actually add a very small amount of bleach to a bucket and then fill the rest with water to preserve the amount of bleach you have available. This is much more efficient than using bleach straight from the bottle. So that's just about everything I can teach you for now with regards to build 42, but if you're a new player looking for more content, there is plenty more where this came from uploaded already on the channel, with more to come in the following weeks. Everything from the perfect safe house locations to the best new mods to try for your upcoming playthroughs. So consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and check out some of my other stuff. You will not be disappointed. Special thank you as always to my fantastic Patreon supporters that back the channel for as little as £3 a month and in turn gain access to our Project Zomboid community multiplayer server and special discussions on our Discord. Link for that is in the description. Thanks everyone, and I will see you all in the next one.